Hello and welcome. My name is Cann with Mining Journal, and with me I have Benedkt Sobotka, Chief Executive of Eurasian Resources Group and Co-Chair of the Global Battery Alliance. This is the first interview of a two-part series we're doing with Benedkt, and today we're going to be talking through ERG's positioning in what is a fairly relatively poorly understood mining region in the global context. Welcome, Benedkt.
Thank you, Chris. Great to be here.
Where are the opportunities for mineral extraction kind of at that basic level in Eurasia as you see them?
Chris, let me talk about the mining industry in general, and then let's come to the Central Asian region in particular. I remember having a similar interview about 10 years ago. It would have been about how the mining industry, those are the bad guys from the dark side of the moon, and commodities, who needs them? They're everywhere, and it's just China who needs them. And I mean, what a change in the last few years has happened. I mean, suddenly people like yourself, people like myself are in the limelight of the global conversation around security of raw materials, the importance of this industry for the green energy transition, geopolitical aspects. I mean, this energy transition in combination with the geopolitical aspects is the biggest purchase order in the history of the mining industry, right? It's exciting, and it's exciting to be at the center of this. Without us, without this industry, there is no energy transition because it's just so much more energy, it's so much more materials intensive than anything before. So when in the past, the mining industry, commodities industries were all about China. Today it is all about China, of course, because it's still the biggest customer for most of the products that the mining industry produces. But ultimately, it is also an incredibly crucial element of geopolitical aspects around the world, whether it's the United States and Europe. So the mining industry now, executives, we get called into conversations with the State Department, with the European Commission. It would have been impossible to have those kind of conversations 10 years ago. So it's exciting to be at the center of this discussion, because we have something to contribute as an industry, as we try to race to the top in terms of ESG and compliance and the sustainability of our operations. We're at the center of something that's really exciting. $50 trillion of investment in the green energy transition. A lot of that will be in mining. The irony is that this industry has never been able to actually deploy anywhere near that kind of capital. And that's across the world. It's not just in Africa or more complicated jurisdictions, also in Central Asia. I mean, in Central Asia, our operations, and we're one of the largest companies in that region. We obviously have a broad-based, pretty diverse raw material customer base: China, Europe, Asia in general, broader Asia, Japan, because of its geographical location. But a country like Kazakhstan, which is our home base and where we've got significant operations, has huge potential as it explores its mineral wealth and mineral resources that are relevant for the energy transition, whether it's in rare earths, whether it's in copper, in chrome, and other strategic minerals. And that's another very interesting aspect of combining the green energy transition with the geopolitical aspects. Is now we've defined, and many governments and regions have defined, strategic minerals. And guess what? There's a lot of strategic minerals, including copper, including zinc, including nickel. So products that were in the past just considered available at any time is just a question of price. Now the question is, where does the material come from? It's the traceability aspects of it. How was it produced? What's the ESG score? So suddenly, this is a very different conversation to the past. And regions like Eurasia, they're ideally positioned for this because they can actually play different markets, which is what we do in Central Asia with our operations today.
So Benedkt, you raise a fantastic point about where we were 10 years ago, where we are today, and that huge issue with supply chain security. And obviously, it's not just about the energy transition. There's a war going on, and supply chain security has become a critical issue. Where does ERG and Eurasia as a region sit in terms of a supply chain and delivering products into desperate markets?
Well, our operations, in particularly in Central Asia, I mean, they straddle different geopolitical areas. Whether it's China, whether it's Eastern Asia, we even sell into Southeast Asia. Of course, geographically, proximity to Russia historically has led us to sell a lot of products into Russia, which we're not doing anymore. Which has increased our sales to Europe, and we sell to the US as well. So really, this is a globally producing region, and it's a globally selling region as well. So in a way, we've benefited from being able to diversify into new markets. Fundamentally, it's a challenge for the mining industry in general we cannot take sides, right? We have companies and businesses to run that need to supply critical raw materials in order to achieve a much bigger global problem, which is global warming. And without the mining industry, there is no green energy transition, and without the green energy transition, there's no end to the warming of the planet, which many of us have seen in the last few weeks and months. In particular, the occurrence of freak temperature events across the world, whether it's the warming of the southern oceans, the warming of the northern oceans, the freak heat events from the US to China, into India, Pakistan, into Europe, Southern Europe in particular. I mean, the occurrence of so many events at the same time is a clear sign that something is going wrong, and we have to fix it. And this is where the mining industry has to help. And yes, it's important to understand where the materials come from, where have they been processed. That's all very important, and we need transparency around that. But it shouldn't come at the expense of a much broader, overarching global goal, which is mitigating global warming. So I think we have to be a little bit more relaxed about the provenance of materials, because as a matter of fact, a lot of those materials, they are refined in China, and that's because of the existing asset base and an incredible competitiveness of China and the refining of those materials. Including some of our materials. We sell cobalt to China and copper to China. And yes, it is refined in China and then sold into the electric vehicle market into Europe. To change that overnight, I think is a political pipe dream. And we have to be realistic, because what we don't want to have is that the push for diversification on the supply chain leads to higher cost. And this is what we're seeing today. We're seeing a lot of greenflation because of a push towards uncompetitive producing regions. Right? Globally, the resources should be produced in the most competitive regions, whether this is Africa or Kazakhstan or Central Asia or Saudi Arabia, because that is for the greater good of achieving an overarching goal, which is reducing global warming. So the most competitive products should be produced in the most competitive regions, refined in the most competitive regions, and sold into the end markets that require reduction of emissions fastest and most significantly.
Great point on the sustainability aspect of the actual delivery of raw materials, Benedkt. How do you see that balance between delivering into supply chains, as you say, globally and not necessarily regionally sensitive, they're all important, and the mining industry earning the right to be that supplier of critical materials for the energy transition?
As I mentioned earlier, as this industry has never had to expand its supply chain, its production as fast as is required today. I mean, we'll have to mine more copper in the next 15 years than has been mined in the history of the world, right? Just as a snippet, right? And that's the same whether it's in lithium, it's in cobalt, it's in manganese, it's in other products that are very difficult to scale. And this industry has a pretty bad track record of scaling up production fast, on schedule, and in budget. Right? It's a fact, because there's a lot of technical risk and a lot of environmental risks and risk around the area you operate and your social license to operate. So this accelerated demand obviously comes with an increased ESG risk. I mean, simply speaking, if you push a supply chain too hard, you get bad behavior, you get ESG compliance problems, because it's always cheaper and it's always faster in the short term to increase production by cutting corners, right? But as an industry, we must not, at any cost, we must not take our social license at risk for trying to increase production too fast. Well, this is around child labor, whether this is environmental issues in nickel, whether this is water in copper production in South America. So we as an industry, we have to race to the top and not to the bottom as we now increase production. And this will require not just a change in behavior for everyone in the industry, not just the big companies like ours and the large global mining companies, but it has to be across the industry for every player. And that's why it's so important that we have a level playing field when it comes to rules and when it comes to transparency and traceability of products. We have to be able to compare products that have been produced sustainable and the ones that have not, because there's a material difference whether one unit of nickel has been produced in certain parts of Southeast Asia from a CO2 emission standpoint, or whether this unit of nickel has been produced in, let's say, in Canada using hydropower. And we have to show those differences because they are material. So really, and this is an opportunity for the industry to really shine and to contribute. The challenge is that this industry, and I see it with our company as well, is it is incredibly difficult to allocate and to channel funding that clearly is available for the energy transition into this industry. This industry has fundamental problems with valuation, has fundamental problems with availability of capital, particularly in more complicated jurisdictions. And with all these programs that we're seeing put up in the European Union or in the United States, actually does not lead to many more investments into this industry. It's still a tiny industry. I think something between $150 billion is invested a year. That's like something like 4 weeks or 3 weeks of the oil industry, right? So, and if you don't invest today, the mine you haven't found today is not going to produce 10 years from now, right? Unless you found it today, you're not going to have units available in 10 years. And that's the same whether it's in our operations in Kazakhstan or in Africa or in South America, is if we haven't found it today, no copper is coming out in the next 10 years. And that's a fact. And we cannot accelerate that, even if there is a lot of political push and impetus towards making things more pragmatic, licensing quicker. It's a complicated industry, and we need to channel a lot more funding into our space in order to achieve those production targets that not our industry has set itself, but that politicians in conjunction with a global social and societal consensus around the necessity of ramping up this demand for the energy transition. So it's just the industry is just behind. We were unable to actually deliver the targets that our customers are setting us in terms of minerals demand. So, but let me come back to one point around the traceability, and this is very important. Today, it's very difficult to give consumers who obviously would like to do something good, right? They would like to reduce emissions. They would like to build a wind farm. They would like to build a solar panel on their house. They actually want to do something good, and they typically have an environmental conscience as well. The problem today is you cannot differentiate whether the products that have gone into this green technology actually has been produced in a green way. And that's something we're working on with the Global Battery Alliance, which is a multi-stakeholder consortium founded originally at the World Economic Forum. We now have 150 members from the automotive industry, electronics, the refiners, the big battery makers, the mining companies, and so on, is actually to create transparency around what are the characteristics of the minerals that go, in this particular case, into batteries. And batteries are absolutely critical for the energy transition, whether it's in the transportation sector, electric vehicles, whether it's in energy storage, stationary storage, and so on. So they're absolutely critical. No energy transition without batteries, right? That's a fact. The question is what kind of chemicals would be in the batteries, what kind of metals, but batteries are an essential part of the energy transition. So we have to make sure that we understand where all these materials come from as this supply chain now expands. And it doesn't expand by like 10% or 20% a year. It expands by 30, 40, 50% per year. This has never happened, probably since the advent of the diesel and petroleum engines, where a supply chain within very few decades exploded. And this is what we're seeing today. So we have to make sure that this is done in a way that the supply chain expands in a responsible and sustainable manner. And there's a lot of data and information available in the form, in this case, of a battery passport, which is a digital twin of the actual battery with the provenance of the materials and the ESG score associated with that. And that's the future, I think, for many minerals, for our industries. We have to create transparency to show that where the industry is racing to the top and where is the industry racing to the bottom, and we have to avoid that.
So in this context of needing a lot more, a lot faster in a sustainable way, how do you see Saudi Arabia and its ambitions around Vision 2030 in terms of disruptive influence in the mineral sector as a provider, a sustainability champion, and probably also a strategic partner providing some of that investment that you're talking about?
Chris, the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia is a very interesting example. I mean, historically, it's a country that's over the last 60, 70, 80 years has based its economy on hydrocarbons, and incredibly successfully so. I mean, let's not forget, this is the largest population, the youngest population in the region, very fast growth. So this is a fascinating country, and I go quite regularly. We've made a very significant commitment to Saudi Arabia for our company, and we're very excited about the opportunities there. The vision that His Royal Highness Prince MBS or Mohammed bin Salman has set as this Vision 2030 is the goal to create a more diverse and sustainable economy, and mining is targeted to be the third pillar of that, right? So among other things like improving the business environment, restructuring economic cities, creating special zones, massive mega projects like NEOM, and the Line, which is probably the largest construction project in the world at the moment. This has been an exciting and very innovative approach to changing the economy into a more diverse, more long-term sustainable, and also significantly lower carbon economy. As a matter of fact, Saudi Arabia has one of the highest per capita CO2 emission footprints in the world. And that's because of the structure of its economy. It's not necessarily because of different behavior of the individuals that live there. So Saudi Arabia is seeking something like $180 billion in mining investment in the next 6 to 7 years to meet the demand for metals in the low carbon economy. So we've applied for exploration permits in the country. It's an exciting area because you've the eastern part of Saudi Arabia, which is where the oil is found, and then you have Riyadh in the middle, and everything from the west to southwest from Riyadh is actually prime, I would call it elephant country, right? So geology that's very old and then has the potential for very significant finds of copper, cobalt, zinc, lead, and other products, rare earths, and also maybe lithium. So this is an exciting area for us, and we're working with the leading mining company in Saudi Arabia, Ma'aden, to search for copper and nickel and other areas, complemented by large-scale tech-enabled early-stage exploration. And it's a great area for exploring new technologies and applying them. And we're using a lot more satellite imagery and interpretation. We're using remote operating vehicles for soil sampling. So this is actually our trial ground for new technology, because Saudi Arabia is very open to technology and trying out new things, and the ambition to be a leader in technology as part of enabling the energy transition is a very strong impetus for us, using that as a testing ground for new technologies. So we believe Saudi Arabia has a history of supplying secure, sustainable, responsible hydrocarbons to the world at incredibly competitive scale. I mean, let's not forget Saudi Arabia is one of the lowest cost hydrocarbon producers in the world, and it will very likely also be one of the lowest cost mining suppliers of the world, straddling the east and the west and the north and the south. So geographically, it's very well positioned to serve many markets, and thus is also, in a way, it's geopolitically agnostic. Because it has a very different locus of thinking and locus of diplomatic anchoring. So it's an exciting place to be, and I go regularly. At the moment, it's hot. It was about 50 degrees last week when I was there. But look, if anyone can pull off an operating environment where you can work at 50 degrees, it's probably Saudi Arabia. So we're very bullish on the kingdom.
It's not the only place that's hot at the moment, obviously, and we are going to get onto that piece about its regional positioning in the second part of the interview. That is all we've got time for today. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you very much. It's great talking to you.